decided to go off now. Awesome. Hello, guys. Hello, and welcome to the Social Distance Book Fest, where you can stay home while supporting authors and indie bookstores, and hopefully add a few more books to your TBR. I'm Natalia, and my channel is Books Build Life. And normally here you can find Latinx books, indie books, and just any book that I really want to be screaming about. Today, I'm excited to be hosting an amazing group of authors for our panel, Fierce Femmes and Badass Girls Standing Your Ground. In a moment, I'm going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves, but if you're wondering what the Social Distance Book Fest is, here is a brief overview. This is an all-day event created by a dedicated group of bookworms from all corners of the internet. It includes 18 panels, more than 80 authors, virtual fandom meetings, virtual signing opportunities, and some amazing giveaways. Check out our website and social media linked below for all the details, and check out our bookshop.org page where you can order books from our featured authors, including the authors on this panel, and support indie bookstores. 10% of proceeds will be donated to the Center for Disaster Philanthropy COVID-19 Fund. We hope you take advantage of everything the Book Fest has to offer. And in case you miss any interesting panels, check out our playlist of all the panels and meetups, which will continue to be available for viewing. With that said, let's hear from our panelists. Please introduce yourselves, including your preferred pronouns, and tell us about your book. So, Sahar, you can begin if you want.
Oh, great. Hi. Thank you, Natalia. Thank you, Social Distance Book Fest. This is terrific. So glad to be on the panel with these other terrific writers. I am she and her, and I'm the author of The Beauty of Your Face, which just launched April 7th. It begins with a scene in an Islamic American school. Afaf Rahman is the principal. And as she is in a room that used to be a confessional, this is basically her place for escape. She hears what she thinks are firecrackers, only to come to realize very quickly that a shooter has entered the building. So that frames the rest of the book. Readers are swept back all the way to 1976 when we first meet Afaf as a young girl. And so essentially each chapter brings us closer to the moment when she faces the shooter.
And we can go in clockwise direction. So Lori, you can go next.
Hi, I'm Lori Emily. I use she, her pronouns. My book Forest of Souls comes out in, I'm like in reverse. So if I go this way, it goes in the other way. Forest of Souls, which comes out in June 23rd. It is about a spy in training who discovers she can shepherd souls, and she has to tame an ancient forest possessed by vengeful spirits before they tear apart the kingdoms. That's my elevator pitch.
Kalynn.
Hi, I'm Kalynn Bayron. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm the author of Cinderella is Dead. Comes out July 7th. Cinderella is Dead is, the quick pitch is queer Black girls team up to overthrow the patriarchy in the former kingdom of Cinderella.
Sounds amazing.
Sofia.
Oh, she's muted.
Hello. Okay, sorry about that. I decided to take off my headphones because they weren't really working for me. So hello, everyone. My name is Sofia Quintero, and I've also written in the past under the pen name Black Artemis when I'm writing hip hop feminist noir. My pronouns are she and her, and the novel that I'm specifically talking about today is Picture Me Rollin', and if that sounds familiar to you, it's also the title of a Tupac Shakur song. My protagonist, SB, is a Tupac fanatic, still believes he's alive in Cuba somewhere, and and she is returning home after doing a year in prison to protect an abusive boyfriend. So she's trying to rebuild her life and finding it extremely difficult to resist the lure of the streets. And goes on a journey of discovering feminism and self-love.
Awesome. All right, Tehlor.
Okay, my name's Taylor K. Mejia, and my book is backwards. We Unleash the Merciless Storm. It's the sequel to, wait, I'm ready. We Set the Dark on Fire. It came out in February, and so the first book, if you haven't read it, is about a girl named Dani who is from the wrong side of the border in a country where that's really not good. And she's basically, her parents have smuggled her onto the right side of this island so she can attend this elite boarding school for training wives. So every husband in this society has 2 wives, and the first book follows Dani's story as she kind of tries to protect her secret and falls in love with the other wife assigned to her house, Carmen. And then book 2 is from Carmen's perspective. It's set in the resistance on the outer part of the island. So you mostly see the capital and all the privileged people, and then in the second book you really get a look at like what's going on the other side of the island and Carmen's internal struggle after she's sort of been pretending to be someone else for the whole first book. So it's into a little bit of how even in radical spaces we can deal with misogyny and patriarchy and how there are systems to dismantle even in resistance values.
Awesome. So I obviously have read some of your books, which is super exciting. And one of the things that I really kept thinking about as an icebreaker question is, if your main character had to pick a song as their anthem, which one would it be and why?
Shall I go? Are we going in the same order? Okay.
Yep, we can go clockwise.
Great. Okay. So I thought this was a great question. I'm going to go with "What Doesn't Kill You Makes You Stronger." You know, Kelly Clarkson. It feels, appropriate when I think about Afaf Rahman and all that has broken her down over the years, and some have been her own choices, and then her sort of reconstructing, her identity. So that felt appropriate and fierce.
Awesome. I love that song.
So this was a hard question for me because I don't make playlists for my books or my characters or anything the way a lot of other authors do. I tend to just listen to the soundtracks of movies and anime series. So I did some Googling and I think she would like it to be like Titanium by Sia.
Okay. Yes.
I think more likely it's like Almost There from The Princess and the Frog.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome. I love how she said, I was Googling. All right, Kat.
This is a tough question. I think it would have to be either Formation, Beyonce, or Django Jane by Janelle Monáe, because they're both about just celebrating Black women and, proclaiming who you are and what you stand for, and that society needs to meet you where you are because you're tired of compromising. So,
yes.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right, Sofia.
Ironically, even though my character is obsessed with Tupac Shakur and the novel makes references to key songs from his body of work, it would not be a Tupac Shakur song because that is part of her journey. She identifies with Tupac because she identifies with his contradictions. Right? He was someone who kind of vacillate between thug life and a very revolutionary impulse, a Black radical impulse. And so she relates to that. But I think because of the journey that she undergoes and the way she grows throughout the novel, she would actually write her own song because her mentor is a former young lord who, when she was Essie's age and in part of the Young Lords movement, was a spoken word artist. And so in the book, there's 2 poems that I commissioned from a writer named Angelique Imani Rodriguez. And she wrote 2 poems in the voice of Tessie's mentor, Maite. And so I think inspired by those two songs, SB would write her own song.
Awesome. We stand a songwriter.
So I like wrestled with this because I feel like it's the most cliche answer, but I feel like Carmen probably, if it existed in her world, would just like listen to Selena. It's like, like, and I mean, it's any song. I tried to narrow it down, but it's like her whole contradiction in the book is really like being like fierce and feminine and like being out there and using like, you know, powers that are traditionally called weaknesses when you're a woman as like her weapons, you know. But then she also has this like really soft, like romantic, like I'm longing for the love of my life kind of side, which I think is a duality that Selena really encompasses. So pretty much put it on
yeah. That's true. I could listen to Selena on replay, so I'm okay with that. All right. So, I mean, you've all kind of addressed a little bit on how all your characters vary differently in your stories. So I was curious, because this is portrayed very differently across all of your books. What does being fierce and feminine mean to you?
For me, as I think about Afaf, I think about being fierce femme is coming from a place of struggle. And it doesn't mean that, you know, you don't have to have a strongly formed identity, but it's maybe even trying to preserve that from people who are trying to dismantle it and basically not allowing you a space to be your true self. And, you know, being fierce is doing everything to get at resources that have been denied, and also uplifting and raising the voices of others, you know, who are in marginalized communities. So I think that also extends outside of like the femme community for me.
Awesome. Yeah, and I can see I can definitely see that in your book. I mean, she's really fighting for what she believes in, and it's pretty awesome. Lori.
I feel like it's a constantly evolving thing for me. So I don't really have a clear answer of what it means to me, but I would just say that it is accepting and respecting all the ways in which we can be fierce and feminine and lifting each other up, like she said. Yeah.
Yes, and I think that's something a lot of people are dealing with. You know, what does that mean to them? It's kind of a constant conversation with yourself. So I think that's really relatable. Kalynn.
So I think that being fierce just means being authentic. It just means being, you know, true to yourself, standing up for what you believe in. I also think it means unlearning a lot of the behaviors that we've been taught kind of define us. And our individual relationships with femininity and how it's expressed are really powerful, because a lot of times, especially in the queer community, we can use those kind of those tropes to subvert heteronormative stereotypes. And you know, who has access to being feminine and who doesn't really is a huge issue. And so I think just being authentic, and then understanding that your relationship with femininity is individual, and that it's not a monolith.
Awesome. Sofia.
For me, it's also an evolving concept, and as I grow as a person, it also shows in my writing. But one thing that specifically now, a layer that's been peeled back for me is being fierce and femme means grappling with my shadow. It means being willing to look at and own all the things I don't want to look at and own. It means knowing that there's lessons and gifts in my flaws and my wounds, just as there are in my gifts and my talents. And I know that as I've been dealing with that, I'm starting to see that the characters that I've written have been, especially the women, have been doing that all along. So they're ahead of me. But I think it's about embracing what's in the dark, and not looking at this false duality of light and dark, what is in the dark, what we would call trash. There's treasure in the trash. And it's about owning it and asking it, what is it that you're here to teach me? And being willing to learn and apply those lessons and recognizing that there's gifts there too, and to no longer apologize or feel shame for what people might call your imperfections.
Everyone's answers were so good. Like, yeah, it's definitely about, learning to advocate for yourself, learning to not let the things that make you feminine be looked at as a weakness. That was a big one when I was younger. So my book is really like exploring the stuff that I unpacked as a teenager. Like, I felt at first like I had to be super, super femme in order to like be taken seriously as a woman, but then you find out you're not taken seriously in a lot of spaces like that. So you go the full opposite direction, like, okay, well, I'm not like other girls now, and I'm gonna, like reject all these traditional notions of femininity. And now it's kind of like a blend of those things. And then also learning that being fierce, especially when you have a lot of privilege, sometimes requires being quiet and letting other people come to the forefront. So just kind of grappling with the privilege that being super femme in queer spaces at least gives you, and like knowing when to step back and let other people have the floor.
Yeah, no, I mean, all of your answers are amazing. I don't think I could add anything to that, to be honest. But the one thing that I liked about all of your stories is that they were so complex and their intersecting identities were so clear to see and experience, which really just had me screaming for all of them. So I'm interested, and I'm sure the readers want to know, how did you approach depicting these characters, and why do you feel like the representation in your book is important?
So my character eventually is going to find Islam. And what I think has been such an interesting challenge is sort of dismantling this idea of Islam. It's conflated with submissiveness, where female practicing Muslims are concerned. And so I wanted to be very sensitive about that, and those kinds of, singular narratives. But I also wanted to make sure that, I really elevated the community of women who embrace Afaf, my character, before she starts to engage in the rituals of Islam. So for me, the femininity, the fierce femme power, it comes from that really strong community of women who are also very visibly Muslimin. And the daily violence, and threat of violence against them requires an incredible amount, I think, of power, courage, going out in the world, in this particular world every day. So I wanted to make sure that as much as I could, and I definitely did not want to feel like I was the only representative, this community. I wanted to offer yet another narrative. So I was interested in expanding this narrative of a young Arab woman who finds Islam, and she comes to it because some other communities sort of failed her. And again, before it becomes something that is an organized religious experience, it's these women who take her under their wing and embrace her for all of her faults, in fact, with no judgment at all. So I hope that people are going to find some familiar portraits, but then they're also going to see Afaf as having this, kind of unique experience. And again, I'm interested in being respectful. And I'm also, I think, trying to be faithful to my own experiences. And then I'm sort of carrying, the stories of others in my Arab and Muslim community.
Awesome. And that's a great responsibility. Like you mentioned, carrying, having people feel like your narrative is the only one is always a fear of that a lot of writers bring up. And I think the way you handled that in your book was very well done. And there are parts that you can relate to, but also feel like you're learning something about the culture as well that you maybe were not familiar with. So, Lori.
So mine's a fantasy, but I wanted a character who who could fight because she's a spy in training. So it comes with all the, dangers of a fantasy spy, and who was good at it and all the moral complexity that comes with that, but who was also like insecure. And she spends the majority of the book searching for a sense of belonging, or trying to search for her identity. And I just also love the idea of this girl really enjoying like the qualities that tend to be derided as frivolous. Like, she likes to be pretty, she likes dresses, she likes wearing nice things, but she can also fight, so I wanted her to have all those qualities. And then another thing that was really important to me in the book was to address like relationships between girls, because the primary relationship in the book is the friendship. And at the time that I was writing the book, I was trying to find books where the friendship between the girls was not depicted as shallow or superficial, or they would spend the entire duration of the book quarreling for petty reasons, and that just drove me nuts. So I wanted to
Relatable.
I was just so frustrated by this, and I was determined to write something that was the complete opposite. So like, I just feel like friendships, especially during those teen years, they can be even more intense than some romantic relationships. So that's really what I wanted to focus on. These two girls who support each other and are there for each other no matter what the plot dictates, tries to pull them apart, or whatever strain is on their relationship.
I absolutely love that. Yeah, it totally makes sense. You're good. Kalynn.
So Sofia is my main character. I have Sofia and Constance are the two main characters, and Sofia is, she's navigating a world where women are expected to follow. They are expected to be grateful even when they're being harmed, and so every law in this society has been set up to make her kind of doubt her worth. And I think that part of what makes Sofia so fierce is that, she's fighting for the choice to participate in things that are traditionally viewed as feminine. The choice is the goal for her, and it's what she wants for everyone. There's a scene where she's kind of getting ready for the ball, and everyone, her mother and they've kind of picked everything out for her. And so her issue isn't necessarily with the dress and the makeup. It's more about, well, that's not what I would have chosen for myself. So she wants to be able to choose what's best for her, versus allowing societal norms to kind of dictate. And then for Constance is the opposite. She is hands-on. She's a strategist. She wants to upend the system, but she really wants to have a solid plan for how to do that. She's a fighter. So the two of them are kind of opposites, and they approach fierceness and femininity in two different ways, but they're both completely valid. And so I think kind of having them both there, showing that you can be all things. You don't have to be just one thing. That was my goal with my characters.
Awesome. And I do remember from reading part of it that the fact that you mentioned that scene with the choices, it's so, I don't guess, frustrating as you read it. You're like, that's not what she wanted to wear. That's not where she wanted to go. And you're just like having that internal fight. So, I mean, I really appreciated that from the book. So I'm sure readers that have it or are going to have it are going to be really excited about it. Sofia?
So it's interesting because I wrote Picture Me Rolling when it was released as a trade paperback book. It was 2005, and it was just re-released last year as an audiobook. Dasha Polanco does an amazing job narrating it. And I feel like some of the things that I was grappling with in that book still require address. So one of the things about SB is an Afro-Latina. She's Puerto Rican, Dominican, born and raised in the Bronx, lives, comes from a working poor family, has an intergenerational experience of women feeling the need to have to depend on men for survival. And because of that dependency, enduring a lot of abuse and efforts at control and abuse in all different ways, and confusing that with love. Like, so Bell Hook's work, All About Love, is a big thing in the book. But the interesting thing is too, with Esperanza is, initially she doesn't have any impulse towards sisterhood, right? Because in addition to having to deal with these abusive men, but you have to compete with other women for them, even though they're horrible. And so part of her burgeoning feminism is cultivating this impulse towards sisterhood, even her former romantic rivals for this abusive ex-boyfriend. And part of why that happens for her is also the mentorship she has. So one thing that is very prominent in Picture Me Rolling is intergenerational relationship. So when she's in prison, her mentor is a new African Black nationalist. And then when she gets out, her GED teacher is a former young lord. And then her own sister, who's only a couple of years older than she is, but who underwent her own transformation, who had enough of the abuse and then left the crew and had to kind of forge it on her own, and is kind of, giving Essie a lot of tough love about doing the same. But one thing that's particularly what I find really interesting now with Picture Me Rolling, even though I first published it like 14 years ago, is when I look at like the popularity of someone like Cardi B, because SB is Cardi B without the money and the fame. And there's been a lot of really interesting conversations on social media around, would you like Cardi B if she lived next door to you? Right? We love Cardi B, but why? Right? We appreciate everything. We can value certain things that she says. We love her enough to grapple with her when we disagree with her, find her problematic, right? But if Cardi B lived next door to you and wasn't famous and didn't have money, would you accept her? Would you engage her? Would you, see her as a fellow human being? Would you be willing to wonder, be curious without being judgmental about some of the choices she made that might be different from yours? So I know one way that I grew through writing Picture Me Rolling was writing the book forced me to grapple with my respectability politics. And so that is something that's a big theme in the story as well. So how we look at people who might make different choices from we are, and then instead of wondering more about the structural inequalities that might shape their choices, we demonize them or villainize them or pathologize them. So that's why that was really important to me, because SB is not me, but was all around me growing up. So what's the difference between me and her, really? Because we're going to be up against the same system. And maybe today it won't be me, but like Trisha Rose said, she said, just because you're not a target doesn't mean you can't get shot. So that's why that was important to me, to write a character like her and complicate her and to show her feminism. That she doesn't go to college. She dropped out of high school, and yet she's a burgeoning feminist. It can look all kinds of ways. It's not just for the elite.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that. I mean, I learned a lot just by listening to you talk about the complexity of the character as well. So, I mean, thank you for sharing that with all of us. Tehlor, thoughts?
I think I really identified a lot with what Kalynn was saying about just two girls who are approaching femininity from these polar opposite entry points. Like Dani she's really put herself in the respectability box. I can't be emotional, I can't be sexual, I can't have feelings of any kind. I just have to be driven and cold and ambitious, and that's the only way anyone's ever gonna take me seriously. So she just really rejects femininity entirely. And then Carmen sort of comes at it from the opposite point, where she's if this is how people are gonna see me, then I'm gonna use it. So she's okay, I'll wear the low-cut dress and the makeup, and I'll be out loud about enjoying that stuff. And she doesn't see any value in the way that Dani approaches it, and vice versa. And then through their relationship, they both sort of realize that you don't have to put yourself into one box or the other to be taken seriously, and that kind of being taken seriously by society isn't really the point at all. It's being sort of like a well-rounded, happy individual, and you need parts of both of those to do that. So like both of their journey is kind of like coming from these opposite entry points and meeting in the middle, where like it's okay to be cunning and ambitious and intense sometimes, and it's okay to be fun and wear makeup and dresses and stuff if you want sometimes, and like since they both start the story, their respective stories, with this like goal of being taken seriously by society, their thing really becomes like, why do we value that? Like, why is that important? Why isn't like being joyful and like making progress that we feel is important the most important thing? And why are we letting other people dictate what the most important thing should be to us?
That's so true. And I mean, like, I know Danny, for example, you mentioned like, you know, Danny and Carmen have such different views of where they come from. But at the same time, like when Carmen maybe doubts like whether she'll be accepted, regardless of which side of her she shows, it's kind of goes to what you just talked about. Like, do I have to be one or the other to be loved or be accepted by other people? So I think that's just amazing. I will scream about that forever. So now all of you touched a little bit about where your books are set and what they bring to the table. So I'm going to jump over that question to, is there a type of fierce femininity that you wanted to see more of in books when you were younger? And if so, do you think your character, like, do you feel your book depicts what you were missing when you were younger?
So I was a child of the late 70s and 80s, and there were no characters of color, let alone, you know, strong female characters in the books that I read. They seemed to fall into two boxes, like the rebellious, you know, troublemaking girl chasing boys, to then maybe like the goody two-shoe who was, you know, an overachiever. And a perfect example of that would be the Sweet Valley High series, which I think has been reincarnated, I don't know, maybe a few times. But you know what? I was such a reader. I read everything. And unfortunately, I never saw myself in any of these stories, and couldn't even believe that there was, you know, a space for me to express myself until much later, you know, when I was basically in college and I was exposed to writers of color. And one in particular is Naomi Shihab Nye, who I am so privileged because I'm going to be in a session with her after this. We're doing a fundraiser for Radius of Arab American Writers. So if you have time, that'll be on Facebook. And she was the first Palestinian American writer who I felt, wow, so this person has carved out a space, you know, and has sort of like opened the door. So yeah, it was incredibly important, you know, for me to authentically represent. And but I don't feel this pressure to put out a character who is going to be perfect, is going to also feel the responsibility of dispelling every stereotype and having that burden. And for me, most importantly, carrying the burden of hope that writers of color seem to be charged with, you know, and the idea of like happy endings. I have a real problem with that. I think there's a difference between, you know, happy and hopeful endings for sure. So yeah, I did not have a lot of exposure, you know, growing up. So someone said this, I think earlier, maybe this is actually in an earlier session. You know, we maybe write the books that we wanted to read or that we want out there in the world. And I definitely felt that calling. And like I said, I hope I've just been expanding the narrative. You know, it's also tough being a so-called hyphenated writer. I think it was Rita Dove who talked about just this immense burden of, you know, representation, but then also writing well. You know, so it's like this double burden that I feel I carry, and I do it because to me, writing also from this place has been privilege. You know, and I'm certainly grateful, but I also understand I deserve a place at the table. You know, so to speak, and I'm glad, you know, for the networks, you know, that have opened up, and for, you know, publishing that is slowly also getting better, that allows me to, you know, put these kinds of narratives, you know, into the world. and again, be something familiar, but then maybe a window for people who have not had any sort of meaningful portrait, of these communities, Arab, Muslim, Palestinian.
Awesome. And it was unapologetic too. I remember reading and I was like, I'm getting every bit of authenticity in here.
Thank you.
Yeah, so like
I feel like that was a really thorough answer already. So I'm just gonna echo a little bit of that. It would have been great to see like more female friendships as a kid, but it wasn't so much different types of femininity or fierce femininity that he needed. It was to see more girls of color in those different types of femininity. When we were there at all, we were just depicted as, sidekicks or background characters or full-on caricatures, and we didn't even get to be the stereotypical strong female character or even the damsel in distress, because those were the lead roles, right? Yeah, so I mean, it's pretty thoroughly covered, but yes, I 100% agree, basically.
That's okay. Not everybody has to elaborate. If you feel you can add to that, it's okay. If not, I can move on. Anybody have any thoughts?
Yeah, for me personally, I really wanted to see Black girls in ball gowns. That was something that I wanted. So, I was born in '83, and so I grew up right around with all those, Disney princesses, and we didn't have Tiana until I was grown. So, I really wanted to see Black girls in ball gowns. I wanted to see us being the heroes. I didn't want to see the Black girl being, the best friend with the attitude, or, the one-dimensional sidekick. And I read a lot of adult books, just because I don't even know when YA, was how that kind of came into being. But I read a lot of Stephen King, so because I love horror and I love Stephen King. He's a problematic fave, but there are a lot of just terrible stereotypes, magical Negro type setups in almost all of his books, and so that's kind of what I was exposed to, and is really frustrating. So I wanted to see. I wanted to see Black girls being, having fun, being joyful. And a part of me is always kind of writing for that younger version of myself, who wanted to see those things. And so I'm always trying to make that part of myself feel seen, with my work. So yeah.
I'm here for Black girls in ball gowns, so. I know, right? Any other thoughts? Tehlor, Sofia?
I just wanted to say that the joy thing, that was my biggest one. It was like when I saw a character that reflected like my culture or my family, it was always like, we're poor and it's hard to be poor. And that was true. Like, we were poor and it was hard to be poor. But I always want to, like, when I was reading, I wanted to escape. I'm a sci-fi fantasy fan, so I didn't always want to read about like struggle, and like the struggle stories are super important and I love some of them, but I definitely wanted to see more of like if I wanted to read about kids my age like doing fun, joyful stuff and like falling in love and having adventures, I had to see outside of like seeing myself reflected. So I just wanted to see like more people that I identified with, like, yeah, just being joyful and like accepting that, being joyful in a community that, or in a society that doesn't want you to be, is also resistance. It doesn't always have to be, we're struggling all the time.
Sofia?
I'm definitely writing the kinds of stories I wish were available when I was growing up. I am Gen X. I grew up in the Bronx's burning Bronx, Reaganomics, US and drop dead cities, and, crack epidemic, HIV epidemic, and also hip hop coming. I'm old enough to know when there was no hip hop. Well, I was really young before there was no hip hop. And I grew up reading Judy Blume and Marilyn Sachs, and I still love them. And I reread them and still learn from their work. But I didn't see many depictions of girls like me, or even just neighborhoods and communities like mine. And then as I was coming of age, becoming a teenager, becoming a young woman, and hip hop proved that it had staying power, that it wasn't this fad, that it was this permanent subculture and eventually a global culture. Um, I never saw the women and girls win. I never saw, as much as I love hip hop, hip hop, just like any other subculture, I think most subcultures, if you, especially in the context of the United States, are going to be steeped with misogyny, right? So I always don't, when people talk about misogyny of hip hop, I'm like, yeah, but hip hop not the only one. So let's not talk like it invented. We want to grapple with it. We want to challenge it. We don't want to let it escape. But it's not the culture that invented it, and any culture in this white supremacist capitalist, heteronormative patriarchy is going to have those elements that you see in hip hop too. So I was just really yearning for hip hop culture, hip hop in that aesthetic, that sensibility, but where the girls and the women win and are not, the window dressing to the men's adventures, or being, the reward that the men get, or being the incentive for why the man does the right thing. I wanted them to be the heroes, sheroes, heroines of their own story. And so I'm definitely writing the kind of things that I wanted to see growing up.
That's awesome. I mean, I can say as a reader, and I'm also a Latinx, I recently just found the trove of all the amazing Latinx books, so it has been really exciting as a reader to see myself in books. So I think what you all are doing, can't speak English now, is really important. And I absolutely love that y'all have find the space to share your stories, because other readers, they need it. They also want to see those characters in their books. They want to see intersecting identities. They want to see complex characters. Like Lori mentioned, like that shallow storyline, I don't think flies anymore. Like we want to get more from our characters, and it's so important. So I have one more question before we transition into like reader submitted questions. If your main character had one last message to say to the world, what would they say?
For Ahmed, my main character, I think it would be once you start to see yourself clearly, others will see you. But the journey to seeing yourself and that self-evolving, it's never a fixed thing, is going to be painful. But it's going to be a struggle that is necessary, because you are basically, going to have to tear down the expectations of others and how they see you, and basically penetrating those walls. But once you find that and you assert that, there is just something amazing. And it doesn't mean, again, that you are not going to continue to battle, even, on a daily basis. I think of, for example, visibly Muslim women, and that's what Afaf becomes at one point. It is basically, a burden that she has very deliberately, taken on. So, you will be seen.
Awesome. Lori?
I guess it would be to not let anyone else dictate your sense of self-worth. I can't say that word, self-worth. Saoirse sort of what part of a major part of her arc is her learning, her journey towards self-acceptance, I think is a better way to put it. She's constantly searching for external validation. Much of what drives her is, if she does this, then she will get this from people. And her journey is, discovering that acceptance needs to come from herself, not from anyone else.
Awesome.
I think that Sofia would probably just say that, you can ask people to treat you with respect and to value you as a human being, that sometimes the system can't be fixed, and so you have to burn it all down.
Yep. Sofia.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Esperanza would pass on the message that her mother Brenda gave her. There's a point in the story where her mother's incarcerated in California. And she goes to visit her, and her mother's incarcerated for killing her abusive partner, and her partner is not SB or Dulce, her sister's father. And Brenda tells SB at one point, when it comes down, if a man ever makes it really clear by what he says, what he does, what he doesn't say, what he won't do, that it's between you and him, always choose you. And I think SB's story, even though that is the most immediate, concrete thing, the context that she gets that lesson, I think that is something that she would say across the board to anyone. It's like, always choose you.
I think for both Danny and Carmen, like they both sort of start their respective stories really believing in like a super problematic societal institution, and then throughout the course of their stories kind of find their way to a more radical point of view, but they don't start there. So I think probably both of their messages would just be like, you can start from anywhere. Like, even if you feel like you don't know all the terminology, or you're not up on everything that's going on, or you don't feel like you're caught up on everything as like the people talking on the internet, like you can start from anywhere. All you have to do is want to change your circumstances and change the circumstances for your community. And just like a small step is still a step. So you don't already have to be there to make a difference.
Awesome. And I love all those messages. That one also almost touches on Sofia's earlier, where like you can learn new behaviors instead of, just doing what you've been taught or what you've learned from society. So I just absolutely love all your books. They all have absolutely amazing messages, and I'm so glad you were able to share a little bit of those books with us. So I'm going to ask a non-book related question about your books, but that your readers really want to know, is what books do you collect for your personal library, or any recommendations? And is there a particular theme that you have for books of your library?
Great question. I have been completely devoted to writers of color. I probably am biased towards Middle Eastern, Arab American, Muslim writers, but I really just want to support marginalized writers. So that is also extending outside of race, religion, some of these typical things, which actually I caught a few from the sessions earlier, which was pretty wonderful in terms of YA and better representation. Did you ask for a title of a book?
Yes, you can give a recommendation. Yeah.
Oh, great. So, you know what? I have two. One is going to be coming out in June, and that one's by Zaina Arafat, and she's a Palestinian American writer, and it's called I Exist Too Much. I think they have been categorizing her as queer, but I don't think I've read anything like it, or have like I said, it'll be coming out in June, so I'm very excited about that. So here's yet another example of the Arab American narrative being expanded. One that I just read that I loved is Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reed, and I knew her when she was a short story writer when I was editing a literary magazine, so it's just been so exciting to see her put out this novel. So I would say that those are my two recs.
Awesome. Lori?
Similarly, I've been trying to focus mostly on authors of color, and maybe 90% of my bookshelves are fantasy because it's just what I love the most. I think we've been really blessed the last couple years with just really amazing fantasies that are inspired by non-Western cultures. Like, publishing is nowhere near where it needs to be, but it is on its way there. And yeah, so I'm really lucky to fill my shelves with those kinds of books. In terms of upcoming books that I'm really excited about Star Daughter by Shweta Thakrar, which comes out in August, and it just sounds amazing. It's about a half-mortal daughter of a star who has to win a celestial competition to save her father, and it just sounds right up my alley.
Awesome.
I don't. I read widely across genres and age categories. So I really, but I love, kind of like I said earlier, I love horror stories. I love thrillers. But I write YA, so I read a ton of YA. But as far as recs go, I mean, Cinderella is Dead comes out July 7th, so gotta rec my own book. But also A Song Below Water by Bethany C. Morrow comes out June 2nd. It is about two Black girls who are sirens in the city of Portland, Oregon, and it deals with misogynoir and how Black women's voices are seen as literal weapons, and how even in a society where other magical creatures exist, they're still singled out. And so I'm looking forward to that. I'm also looking forward to Clap When You Land by Acevedo. I have read, The Poet X, With the Fire on High. Her work is just, it makes me want to just take anything I'm working on and throw it away. Like, her work is so amazing, and so I'm really looking forward to that. So those are my recs.
Awesome.
Totally gonna say Clap When You Land too. I'm so excited. Everything she writes is just magic. Like, it's like when you see somebody win like every award, and it's like when you write in the same genre, it's almost hard not to be like a little jealous. But with her, I was just like, she deserves it. She deserves everything. Like, just
every bit of it.
I read super widely too. It's hard for me to read in my own genre when I'm writing. So I've been reading a lot of like adult and poetry and nonfiction and stuff. So yeah, besides Clap When You Land, just like I'm looking forward to like some novels and verse, and it helps me with my like prose to read a lot of poetry. So I've been doing a lot of that. There's a book that I love that came out last year called Citizen Illegal by Jose Olivares, and it's absolutely stellar if you haven't read it.
Sofia? Maybe. Oh, she left us. Well, the one thing I'm going to ask, since we have a couple of more minutes, is what do you think is the message that you would want readers to take away from your book?
I think, for me, and this I think is obvious by the end of the book, is that we just have so many stories that make up our identities, and you really don't know someone unless you ask. Where have you come from? Where are you going? Afef, she really embodies, all the complicated, histories of her parents being Palestinian immigrants, and then having to, be a second generation here in the States, and the implications of that. And so the stories that she has carried bring her to that really critical moment with the white shooter. So yeah, I would say that we need to honor those stories. We need to hear those stories and make spaces for those stories, because they're actually, as hard as they are and disturbing and sometimes violent, they're necessary.
Lori?
I mean, I do really hope that readers that the themes of like friendship and self-acceptance and loyalty and all that in the stories will resonate with readers. But I think ultimately, like for me, when I was a kid, fantasy was an escape from, you know, a lot of the issues that I had as a kid and like family and all that stuff. So that I'm not going to get into because no one needs a sob story. But so ultimately, I just want Force of Souls to be that for someone as well, to be that escape.
I think that I want readers to feel seen. I want you to know that if you share, you know, an underrepresented identity with these characters, that you belong in fantasy stories just as much as anyone else. And that I also want people who don't share those identities to get comfortable with seeing us in these roles, because we're not going.
Yes.
I think mine is just probably like that no matter what your situation is, that there's hope and that you deserve joy, especially for there's not sure like because you haven't often seen yourself as deserving joy or experience joy doesn't mean you don't deserve it and like you shouldn't go out and find it and never let it go.
All right. Sofia?
I through all of my work, but especially with Picture Me Rolling, and I think this is true of all of us here, especially after hearing all of you. You know, not just writing stories to be entertaining. As entertaining as our work is, I think we're cultural workers, and we really truly want, through the power of entertaining stories, meet people where they are, but take them someplace better, and perhaps make them rethink the things they take for granted, as well as, you know, question things, as well as envision other possibilities for the kind of world that we could live in. And so what I hope that people take away from Picture Me Rolling and anything that I write is, again, questioning the social, political, economic, and cultural context that shapes individual choices, and to have more compassion for people who make choices that might be different from your own, and to see that we are all connected and we are all one. And so we all win when anybody wins, and we have to try. But again, at the same time, the only ones who have a problem with that are the ones that don't believe in that oneness, right? They have scarcity mentality. They want, I can't have, you have, I can't have. And so I hope that what people take away from my work is to really question institutions, even as they're following these individual characters on these very specific journeys, that they start to see the social, economic forces that are at play, and look to challenging that.
Awesome. So we're about running out of time, but I just wanted to say that one of the best things about all the books that I had the wonderful chance to feature on this channel is that not only are they great books, but they also allow many people to be seen. They address a lot of situations that many people find themselves under. And I just love that your books are the kind that we can go find escape in, but also learn about other cultures and other identities and other experiences that we might not know for ourselves. And I'm just really glad that you are all putting your work out there. And if you have something that you want to share, something you want to promote, a book that you have upcoming that we don't know about, you can feel free to share some details before we go. So Sahar, you can go first. Oh, so far we can't hear you. There you go.
Sorry about that. Yeah, just one more time. Here's the beauty of your face. I hope you guys will check me out. I'm on Twitter and Facebook and not on Instagram, much to my daughter's disappointment. But, you know, I have to, you know, set some sort of boundary. Thank you.
Yeah, and once again, just Force of Souls. It's out June 23rd.
Yeah, I have. Here we go. I have Cinderella's Dead, July 7th. Everywhere books are sold.
Yep.
Yay.
You can read the whole story, start to finish.
I don't think we can see Sofia.
And I don't have my audiobooks because I'm quarantined with my parents. I don't have audiobooks because I'm quarantined with my parents, but you can see it pinned to my Twitter profile. And there's more where that came from. I've written 6 books. I'm working on my 7th one. And follow me on Twitter so that you can hear the upcoming good news. I'm hoping before the year is out to announce a television show that I've been working on for about past year now.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all of you joining me. It was an honor, and I'm so glad you took the time out of your day. And have a good day.
Thank you so much.
Bye.